man, I got to tell you, I am so honored to bring these two boys on the air with me this afternoon. Normally, we are live in the morning. This afternoon, we are hopping on with two guys who have a very, very, very busy life and are running around. And, man, I said, you know what? We're going to catch you when we catch you, and we got you. Rick Yarosh and Tom Murphy, welcome, guys. Welcome, sweethearts and heroes. So thrilled to have you both in here.
Awesome to be here, JD.
Thank you, my man. Thank you, guys. So this is like podcast number what for you guys? How many have you done?
Well, together, this is probably like 10 or 11 together, but we've done a lot on our own as well.
You have?
Yeah.
How many would you say if you had to guess?
I don't know, maybe 100.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll tell you, though, this is our first
Uh-oh.
where we sat on the same couch together.
Really?
I'm a little uncomfortable right
Are
now.
you?
I'm not gonna lie, yeah. I don't know if I've ever sat this close to
Well,
Tom
listen,
in
if
13 years.
if he puts his hand on your leg, everyone's going to know
well,
it.
that was
Everyone's
before
gonna
the
see
camera started.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing, JD.
Yeah.
He's not gonna feel it because I'm on the wrong side.
That's right.
He's got a wicked awesome robot leg under there. So he's not gonna feel it.
He's not going to know. Oh,
Play
my
pussies
God.
with me all day.
You guys, man, you know, right off the bat, and I've just met you a matter of minutes ago, and I feel, based on what I've seen online from what you guys have produced and what your production company has put out on YouTube, I feel like I had already known you guys before I met you in the flesh, which is pretty cool.
It's really interesting what you're saying, and I haven't thought about this in a long time. And I think Rick will read my mind on just about
I
everything.
feel like I know what's coming.
Well, we spend. This is no lie. We spend 200 to 220 days together for the last 13 years almost. So I've spent more anniversaries with Rick than my own wife.
That's what
Yeah.
he gets, though, for getting married during the school year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right? I got married in the summer, so I don't have to spend any with him.
Yeah, and so what's interesting about what you said is, sometimes when we go to schools, a lot of the kids know us before we get there, and they're like, "Hey, Tom," and I'm like, "Whoa, this is weird," but it's a pretty cool thing when young people will build a relationship with you. Not even knowing you, and they have a relationship with you, but you don't have one with them.
Yeah.
But it makes for very, very interesting dynamics when you start to get to know them.
Yes,
because they learn little things about you.
Very much relate to that.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I have to ask before we dive in, and I want to talk about obviously sweethearts and heroes and the inception of this and what it's all about. But do you have any kids?
How many kids you got, Tom?
Let me take my shoes off.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids.
You have 4 kids.
Well, they're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
They're all young adults. My oldest is 26 or 27, and my youngest just turned 21.
All right.
So, yeah.
All right.
3 girls and a
Abby,
boy.
He knows how old you are.
3 girls and a boy.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Rick?
I got 2 girls, a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old. And birthday's coming up, so basically a 13 and a 5-year-old.
Okay. We're going to get to that in just a little bit here, but sweethearts and heroes, rooted in St. Albans?
Rooted in America.
Yeah,
rooted in
the
America.
roots are long.
Who's from St. Albans?
Me.
Okay.
Not from St. Albans, but I've lived there since 99.
Okay. You literally have told me, dude, if you want us on the podcast, you better get us when you got us, because we're moving and we are traveling America. Over 2 million kids you guys have spoken to in the last...
Well, about 16 years. Rick and I have been together for about 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's been about 16 years.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That is remarkable.
It feels good even hearing it. I think it's pretty cool.
You were just at my daughter's school doing a presentation there. Is that what we would call it? What do you call it?
That's what we call it, yeah.
presentation.
There's so much more to it.
All right.
People call it a show.
Okay.
But I will say this, and this is just a bookmark for you. We start with the presentation, but at this point in our career, we've scaled to a full set of classes.
Okay.
And we have a third year 103 senior level class that this work transitions through. So there's a tremendous amount to it, but we started with just this silly little presentation 16 years ago.
And that was you.
I kind of started it. Yeah.
Okay. This morning you were in Rutland.
Mm-hmm. City.
Rutland City School.
Yep.
Tomorrow you're going to be where?
Williamstown.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting because we don't do a lot of work in Vermont.
Okay.
Heartbreaking to me because it's where my kids were raised, but we don't do a ton in Vermont. So I love being in Vermont.
Most of the things that we do in Vermont are sponsored by the Chevy dealers in the areas, which is amazing.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Kudos to them, man.
Yeah.
They're hopping on the right thing. They're attaching their brand to the right thing.
We've been working with them for how long now?
At least 5 years.
Yeah.
At least 5 years.
That's amazing.
15 different dealers.
Obviously, I'm going to ask both of you, what is Sweethearts and Heroes, and when did it start again? Tell me that again.
So I would tell you that somewhere around 2009, How do you want to launch into this story? Because I can give you, I'll try and do a very abridged version of it.
Okay.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Because people say, when did it start?
Yeah.
And if I really had to think about its inception, I would say when I was about 8 or 9 years old, living in Philadelphia. And people are like, what? Sweethearts and Heroes started back then. So how would you like me to attack this? Because
any way you want, brother.
I'm going to try and put it under 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh God! So 10 or 15 at the minimum.
I got pens here. You want me to throw one?
Yes,
Well,
please.
actually, let's get
Give him a hook. He's been hooked once before.
Can we get something out of the way here quickly?
Yeah, please.
Because in case anybody that's online wants to comment, sometimes some inappropriate things will slip out.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is.
Well, this is not FCC, my man. You
Okay.
can say anything.
Okay.
you
Yeah, but
want.
we speak in schools too,
Yeah,
so
we speak in
schools.
they don't slip out in schools. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like vulgar, inappropriate
Right.
content, but Rick and I have a very unique relationship. And the one piece of advice I give to young people and people that meet Rick, I say, listen, never get in a roasting battle with a guy that's been roasted.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. You've heard this before, Rick?
Oh yeah.
And usually when I say that, people look at me and they're like, I can't believe you just said that. And I said, hold on a minute. Let me tell you a quick story. So when I first met Rick 13 years ago, I treated him like he was a wounded puppy. And what Rick doesn't want you to do is that. He wants you to treat him like he's your buddy.
Yeah.
And so.
Unless you're not done. Don't.
Yeah, then you don't.
Right.
But so. I'll give you one quick example. So one year I vlogged the entire year, and Rick hated the camera. He would say highly inappropriate things, so I couldn't use the material sometimes when kids weren't involved.
Smart.
Yep, smart. And but anyway, so I'd never seen Rick in his wheelchair. You know, it was his prosthetic, and for the first couple of years, never saw him once in his wheelchair.
Okay.
And so Rick shows up. He calls me one night, and he goes, hey, I'm going to be late getting to the hotel. I'm going to be in my wheelchair. And I was like, wow. Really? And I just got a little bit fascinated because immediately you look at him and you say, well, he's got his bag, his shirt, his dog, his wheelchair, his bags, and all you got to do is see his hands. Oh, wait, and he has one leg. So you think about, being able to use your legs to pull your wheelchair. Well, he's obviously not going to do that. He can't use his hands effectively on these tires. Yeah. So when he said he was going to get there late, I decided not to stay up because it was going to be after 11. So the next morning I get up with my vlog camera and I'm sitting, and I wasn't clowning around. I wasn't trying to push his button, but I'm in front of the elevator. The breakfast area is packed and I'm sitting right there like a little kid, right? And I got my camera and ding, the door's open like this, and there's Rick. And what he does is he hooks his heel on the ground and he pulls himself out like this, and he just pulls. And he gets about 3 or 4 pulls out, and he looks at me, and he just does this. Gives you the are you really starting at 6 o'clock in the morning with this stupid camera?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, his head just snaps up, and he looks around, and he goes, excuse me, sir, must you film a disabled man? And then he went right to the door.
Good
and I'm
for
just
you.
like,
Don't mess with me. You will get roasted.
yeah.
Burned by the burn guy or roasted by the roasted guy, whichever one you want.
So I just want to get that out there quickly because sometimes when you're with your best friend,
Sure.
you say things that you probably shouldn't say.
Right.
And then when people look at Rick, they're like, oh, I can't believe you just said that to him.
Yeah.
But listen, when you're at a restaurant
Yeah.
and he's clowning on you and he's like, why do you got to say that about the burnt guy, Tom? You're like, dude.
In the end, who are people going to side with?
Oh,
Me?
right. Of
Yeah.
course
Or this
they
guy.
are. Of
So,
course.
Anyway, just need to get that out quick.
Wow.
But one of the things is I've never been able to really laugh at myself. And over the last decade of my life, Rick Yarosh has taught me so many things that I can't even quantify it. But the value he's brought into my life, and one of the great things Rick has given me, is the ability to laugh at myself. And I'm a tough guy. Vulnerability was tough for me, and it's something I talk about every day now is vulnerability. And I got to give a lot of that credit to Rick because it's like, dude, life is too short, man.
Yeah.
Look, I got blown to hell.
Right.
The best thing that ever happened to me, and I can have fun with
Right.
it.
And Rick, you say that. Obviously, I want to get to your story and share that if you're willing to, and I'm assuming that you are.
Oh, for sure.
But first, though, for folks that are just joining us that may not be familiar with who you are and what Sweethearts and Heroes is, what is it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I'll give you a quick log line. You know, we empower young people to be the change within their peer network. That's what we've been doing for 16 years. And there's a tremendous amount in that statement. There's a tremendous amount of science. It didn't start like that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go into a little explanation of the origin?
Sure, please.
So, again, 3 or 4 minutes. Start the timer, Rick. And
It's not going to happen, is it, Rick?
no, it will. I promise. Because when I say it started in Philadelphia, my parents ran a mission home, and we had no money, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember my dad would put $2 bills in books, and I can remember as a kid watching my mom shaking out books to try and find $2 bills for milk. And I just remember that as a kid, but we always had people living with us. And my parents started this mission home, used to take people off the streets of Philadelphia. And that's when it began for me. And I didn't understand that. There's no thought process around that. My dad wanted to get us out of Philadelphia. He spent his whole life there. Packed myself, my sisters in a van, took us to upstate New York, literally opened up a magazine, Cooperstown, New York, drove us up there, never had been up there, bought a house for $32,000. And I went to Cooperstown High School. I was a very, very challenging student. Academically, I had a lot of challenges. But I found the sport of wrestling. Just fell in love with it. Changed my life. It was really one of my saviors. It just gave me focus. The school could control me with wrestling because if you're not a good boy, you can't wrestle. So I could do anything as long as wrestling was involved. I was just coded to touch people. And so, I struggled through high school. I was going to wrestle the rest of my life. And, then college came. And if I told you how I got into college, it'd make you believe in cosmic forces. It's like too hard to believe. And the only one story that beats that is the one where Rick and I came together, and I might tell you that one. But ended up getting into college, fell in love with education, had a couple people come into my life and mentor me. And I got my high school, I had a 630 on my SATs. You got that on one half of your SATs. Most people do. And then I graduated with almost a perfect GPA in philosophy and psychology. And I didn't get any smarter. I just learned to take the strategies from wrestling and apply them to academics because this man came into my life and just really mentored me. And it was a long discussion conversation. But wrestling got done. I was runner-up in the country my last year. And I wasn't ready to stop wrestling. It was my life. From the time I could walk, my dad and I would wrestle. And this story is going to come full circle. And so I found myself training at a gym in Montreal, some of the best guys on planet Earth. And it wasn't to compete. It was just to train because I'm a training junkie. And my sister applied me to a show, a reality TV show. I didn't even watch the first season. I ended up becoming one of the 8 heavyweights, really in America on planet Earth, to be on this show on Spike TV called The Ultimate Fighter. And when I got done the show, people called me. And just people I knew. Hey, my kid saw you on the show. And I never watched this show. I swear, I never watched it, even when it aired. And I still to this day haven't watched it. And so people called me and they're like, hey, can you talk to my basketball team, my cheerleaders? They saw you on the show. And, you know, what was that all about?
No, I was just saying.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a question.
this is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So I found myself on this show, got off, got a little stint with the UFC. But I just started talking to young people, and I was able to take the lessons from this guy that mentored me in college. I had a wonderful career in the rail industry for 17 years. I worked for a man that took us from $500 million to $2 billion directly for him. And he just gave me some unbelievable lessons about life. I had bought a restaurant, bought a gym. I was doing some other stuff on the side. And I was always able to just take these little lessons, my own academic inefficiencies and, you know, all this other stuff that was going on in my life. And I really wasn't thinking about my childhood. But as I started to talk to young people, and it was more motivation, leadership kind of stuff, a buddy of mine who I wrestled with in college called me and said, hey, I'm in trouble. I was in charge of this bullying seminar, and the speaker fell out last minute. Can you do something? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, it's 900 middle schoolers.
Wow.
Like, oh, crap. So, you know, they're like savages, dude.
Sure they are.
Like,
relentless.
Little kids are easy to present to. High school and adults, if they don't buy what you're saying, they'll just tune you out. A middle schooler will ruin you. They'll start fooling with their buddies. And so anyway, I had to make something entertaining. And I knew that because I had a hard time paying attention. So I took about a minute of me competing in a cage. The principal let us do it. I played that. And the whole inception of the thing was for me to run out, put that on the screen. I'm there to talk about bullying. And my first line is, who knows what the name of that sport is? Mixed martial arts, somebody that's going to say. And then I say, I'm going to tell you one thing about mixed martial arts. I'm not going to mention it for the rest of the time that we're together. You ready? I hate fighting. Like, confused. Wait a minute. And then I go into a brief explanation about it. It's a sport. But my plan was to run out and say the only reason I could get in that cage was because of your gym teacher. Because he was bigger than me, stronger than me, older than me. He would slap me on the face in the weight room. He'd shove me across the wrestling room. But he didn't do it to be mean to me. He did it because he saw my potential. Now, what I didn't tell you was, before I did it, I grabbed my dictionary from college that has word origins in it. And when I opened it up to the word bully, because I was never bullied. I never really bullied anyone. I just was a bystander. I just saw it happen. And when I looked up the word bully in the dictionary, it said word origin, 16th century sweetheart. And I was like, what? So I did this deep dive. It just fascinated me. And the word bully in the 16th century meant sweetheart. It was a very endearing term. It was someone that came in, kicked you in the shorts, said, get your crap, get in the car, you picked this stupid sport, you're finishing the season. You brought that new instrument home. It was hard. It just sat there against the wall. Hey, young man, I bought that for you. Let's go. Or when you were in college and life was just kicking your butt and you didn't feel like getting out of bed, she called you up on the phone and said, get your stuff on. I'm coming over. We're going out. Those are your 16th century bullies. I would guarantee you wouldn't be in that chair right now if it wasn't for a handful of people and what they gave you when you needed it the most. And what they gave you was this thing called hope, right? And Rick will talk a little bit about hope here in a second. Let me button this story up. So that was the original intent, was to give credit to this guy that bullied me the way the word was intended to be used. And people always say, well, when did it change? Well, about 100 years later, we found that pimps would bully Johns for their sweethearts or their girls, and that's where we get the modern definition, harasser of the week. But anyway, so that was my whole plan. And then to talk a little bit about superheroes, because what kid didn't want to be a superhero? Sure. So that was the original inception. But here's what happened. I found myself after presentations, and none of this was planned, dude. Like, All these kids, teachers, schools, none of it was planned. It's like a big happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say, right? And so I found myself packing my stuff up, and some kid would always sneak back in and want to tell me their story, and especially the challenges that they were facing in life. And it kind of made me uncomfortable at first because, there's tears involved. I'm in a room with a kid and he's pouring his heart out to me and I'm like, what is happening here? But what happened is, man, I found myself looking through the same eyeballs at the same people that I grew up with. The brothers and sisters I had, the foster kids. I used to go to prison on the weekends to visit people that ate at our dinner table. They were my brothers and sisters, but they were hopeless. And I didn't understand this at first. And I found myself talking to kids. And at one point, after a couple of years, I was like, what do I tell this kid? I don't understand this feeling of hopelessness. And really, at the end of the day, that's what our whole message is about. We might be living amongst one of the most hopeless generations that Earth has ever known. Suicides have tripled in middle schoolers. 30% of young women post-pandemic in this country have considered ending their own lives.
Since 2007, I
That's
think
right.
That's right. That we've tripled it.
That's right. And so
for age what now?
10 to 14 years.
10 to 14.
About 3,041 high schoolers attempt every day. So there's a ton.
That puts the hair up on my arms, man.
It should, especially with the 10-year-old little girl that's just entering that age bracket. But let me get it to Rick because I want to toss it over to him here. When I found myself, even though I grew up with young people that were battling that feeling, who am I to talk about that? So I'm at this, our organization's at this wrestling event, and this guy's like, hey, you got to meet this guy, Rick Yarosh. And he was there, got inducted in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I was there. We were there. Our organization was there teaching some moves, and just had a chance meeting with Rick. Hi, how you doing? You go to shake his hand, and you're like, whoa, what's this happening here? And that had such a profound effect on me, that Rick's story, that I started weaving it into our presentation because I needed young people to understand that getting blown up doesn't just mean being in a fire. A lot of young kids, they feel like they're on fire on the inside, socially, psychologically, emotionally, like they're burning to death.
Sure.
So I started to weave that in, but it was only 5 minutes of our presentation. And people loved it. Teachers would start crying. I'd drop a picture of Rick that hung in the Smithsonian. And it just became a huge part. So I started reaching out to him, and I was like, dude, I'm using your story. You don't know who I am. You don't remember our organization, because it was just a quick meeting. He ignored me for about a year. Wouldn't even answer an email or a message. And
wow.
Had no interest.
Yeah, it's crazy. Bullying.
UFC fighter bullying. This
right.
is a little weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was like, dude, I did my part. Like, I don't care. At least I told him I was using his story. But what Rick thought was, at the end of the day, if he really dove into it, he thought he wanted to be our token hero. Yeah. And he just doesn't ever see himself as a hero.
Sweethearts and heroes. Like, I was going to be the hero in Heroes.
Yeah. But that's not what I was looking for. What I needed was for someone that kids could relate to, that understand hope and hopelessness on another level. Yeah. One that I can't ever and don't ever want to understand. And so if we told you the story and how we met, it's like, no way, officially. But eventually we get together. I beg him. I'm like, dude, just come watch a presentation. And that's history, man. And 13 years ago, he came, and
somehow you got him on stage.
Yeah. It was great. But that's kind of the origin story. There's a lot of little pieces I left out, but that was probably like 6 or 7 minutes.
No, that was longer than.
Come on, bro.
Dude, your time concept.
No concept.
No.
Now, see, this is what happens. Everyone takes his side,
right.
and then they gang up on me.
But he makes it sound like I don't have a legit claim for his 3 or 4 minute.
Anyway, that's kind of the origin story.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Rick, where are you from?
Born and raised in Windsor, New York, so the southern tier of New York, near Binghamton.
All right. Obviously, we want to hear about hope. We want to hear about your concept of hope, which I have said on the air before here that I think if you were to ask me what's one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous words in the world, I would probably say hope. Because it either works really well for you or it really doesn't. And to have hope and then to have tasted it once and then to lose it, it's tough to get back.
That's a profound statement, man.
So I want to hear what you have to say about that, but Rick, but we want to know what your story is. I think I know a little bit of your story as told through the lens of my 10-year-old little girl.
Sure, yeah.
Who said to me when she came home, so there was this other guy and he was born differently. Yeah. Actually, he wasn't born differently. There was an accident. I want to know
when she said that. Is she talking about Tom or? He's born a little differently.
Something else.
Now, he said it twice. Are you going to correct him?
Nope.
Yeah.
He always corrects me on this.
Yeah.
I remember the first couple of times he did it. You know what I'm going to say?
No.
Come on.
What
did he say?
I don't know.
It was not an accident.
Oh, no, yeah. We weren't there yet. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He did say it twice, though.
I did.
Yeah.
He corrects me on it all. He used to correct me. I don't say it anymore.
So I used to make the mistake of saying it was an accident as well. Because,
no accident.
It
was on purpose.
Yeah, it
was intentional.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that leads into the story.
Yeah.
What happened? What tell us.
So we you said we'll talk about hope in a little bit, but my story is hope and hopelessness, and it fits right into it. But really becoming a part of the organization Sweethearts and Heroes really begins with high school and not doing very well and leading me to the military, and I needed the military more than the military needed me. I deployed to Iraq in I think it was December of 2004, right before Christmas time. Spent Christmas in Kuwait and drove up to Baghdad, Iraq, and on New Year's Day. So I can remember seeing fireworks in Iraq, and that was my first real experience of explosions, and it was kind of weird. I know that we're celebrating back home, but they're also celebrating over here, but it's a different kind of celebration, and driving up there and watching out to make sure that we're not getting hit with IEDs while we're also watching fireworks and driving up the road. It's an interesting time. But
wow.
I deployed in 2004 December, and 9 months into my deployment, I was in my Bradley fighting vehicle, which is like a small tank. And we were hit with an IED, improvised explosive device, and the explosion went through the bottom of my vehicle into the turret where I was sitting. And great concept of the Bradley is they also put the fuel tank in the turret. There's just nowhere else to put it, and I don't know the exact number, but it's like 168 gallons of fuel that we carried, and we always would fill up before we would leave. So an entire gas tank exploded and covered me in fuel, instantly on fire. Diesel, yeah. JP8, yeah, very flammable. So as soon as that hit me, I was on fire, and first thing I had to do, I knew, with any chance to survive, you ask a kid, what do you do? Well, stop, drop, and roll. But there's a process to get to that point. I had to get out of the vehicle first, so I climbed through the top. And thank God that day I left the hatch above me open, because normally I did not. We were supposed to keep them closed, and we were supposed to keep them closed in case we ever got hit with chemicals. And if we got hit with chemicals, the chemicals couldn't get into the vehicle, so we closed them. That day, Montez, our Bradley commander, who would sit right next to me, he actually stood on his seat, so he left his hatch open. So if his hatch was open, there was no point in closing mine either. So thank God he stood on his seat that day, because if he hadn't, we would have closed our vehicle, we would have buttoned up, and I never would have gotten out. I would have never found the lever above me with the smoke, the fire, the chaos. Never would have happened. So thank God I left it open, and I was able to climb through the top. And then once I got to the top, the next thing I had to do was get to the ground. And the problem was it's 10 feet tall. And the bigger problem was I was blind. 10 feet tall is the top, so I had to jump 10 feet to the ground. But doing it blind was the big issue, because my face was on fire and my eyes were covered with the fire. So I jumped just took a leap of faith, really, and just hoped that I would make it to the ground, hope I would live through this whole thing. But when I did land on the ground, I couldn't see the ground and couldn't brace myself for the landing, so I broke my leg when I landed and severed an artery in my leg. So 4 days later in the hospital, they actually amputated. But this is when, things get bad. Now, obviously, things are already bad, but nothing's as bad as feeling hopeless in this world. And that's when it happened, because that's when I was on the ground. And I did stop, drop, and roll, because that's the third step in this. Out of the vehicle, off of the vehicle, put the fire out, stop, drop, and roll. And it didn't work because, my whole body was engulfed in fuel and flames. I could not put that fire out.
You're burning alive.
I'm burning alive. And that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm burning to death. I'm not going to live through this. Like, the thing that I'm taught to do didn't work. I can't stand up and run. My leg is broken. Even if I could run and stand up, where was I going? My face was on fire. So that's when I laid on my back, and I literally just accepted that I would die. I gave up something super important. Every one of us has it in this room. We talked about it already, and that's hope. So it is a dangerous word, but it's also one of the most important words in this world. It's one of the most important things to have, because I think about a person who has no hope. What's that look like? It looks like me laying on the ground on fire, accepting that I'm dead. That's what happened. And the crazy thing is, that day, I only gave up hope for a second. Now I say I got hope back, and I rolled into a canal that was there, and I put the fire out. But in the end, I didn't make that conscious decision to roll in one direction. I made the conscious decision to lay on my back and give up, because there was nothing else I could do. But then I rolled in one direction, and I fell into a canal. And the water in the canal put the fire out and saved my life.
He didn't know the canal was there.
No
either.
clue that the canal was there. I could have rolled back to that burning Bradley. I had no concept of what direction.
Which direction?
Yep. And there was the water.
That's one tough mofo right there.
Well,
wow.
I give a lot of credit to God. I give a lot of credit to the people around me, the whole thing, because so that part, there's nobody else in that story at that time other than me, and I give credit to God for pushing me into that canal. But then this is when people do come into my life again, and that's when my buddies found me in the canal and carried me out. And but when I got to the top of the canal is when I could really see what the future might be like if I lived, because obviously my injuries were bad enough I may not.
What percentage of your body was
60%. So basically, I was basically saved by my IBAS, which is our body armor, our bulletproof vests. When my buddies grabbed me out of the canal, well, for one of them grabbed under my arms, and the other one grabbed under my legs. And the one that grabbed under my legs, when they grabbed my legs, I had to tell them my leg is broken. And I didn't tell him so nicely, because it was very, very painful. My leg was so broken. So he grabbed my legs. Then my other buddy actually grabbed my IBAS first. And when he lifted me from the IBAS just disintegrated and broke as soon as it lifted me up, and I was back in the water. And then he grabbed under my arms, and then they carried me out. But when I got to the top is when I could see again, and I could see my hands. They were hanging from my fingertips. My palms were. My face was hanging from my chin. I could see that. And like I said, it was bad, and I might not live. But if I did live, man, life was about to change. Everything would be different at this point. And my one buddy who had actually pulled me out of the canal, one of my buddies, stood over top of me, helped me out, just being there for me. We need people in our lives at certain times in our lives, and he was there for me in that moment. I asked him a silly question. I said, "How bad is it?" And as good friends would do in that kind of situation is lie, because the truth was it's really bad and you might not live. It's not what I needed to hear. So he said, it's not that bad. And then I looked back at him and I actually said, well, at least I'll never be as ugly as you are. Wow. So I was just burning alive, burning to death. They saved my life, and I'm going through some real trauma in this moment. And I was always the funny guy. I always had a sense of humor. I still do, thank God. And I believe that's why I'm in the position I'm in today, the part of it anyways. But I said that, and when I said that, it helped me for sure, but it also helped him, because the truth is, it's really bad, Rick, and you might not live. Sure, that's not what he said, but that's the truth. But then he heard that my sense of humor was there, and I think it gave him some hope as well. Maybe he's going to be okay.
There's that word again.
Yeah.
How long was it before they had you in the bird and got you out of there?
It's unbelievable. So that day, usually there's helicopters everywhere. The bases are very close, and it took them over 30 minutes to get there, and it was only because they had issues with the helicopters on the way out. So all the Blackhawks, the medical Blackhawks that come and get you, they have to be escorted by Apaches. And usually it's 2 Blackhawks. We had 3 major injuries, and I think they flew 2 Blackhawks, but they also have 2 Apaches. And one of the helicopters, I don't know which one, had some trouble, so they had to go back, exchange, and get some new ones to come out and get us. So it took them about 30 minutes to get there. Now, I don't remember that. I don't remember the timing of it, but I remember them saying, they had to go back. So later on, I heard that it was 30 minutes. But when I was, I remember it all. I remember my buddies putting someone's Kevlar under my leg to prop it up in the air. We didn't have a medic with us that day, which we never didn't have a medic with us. But there was one medic, and there was 43 scouts. I was a scout, a cavalry scout. And we could get a day off once in a while. And one medic, they don't get a day off. So the one day we decided to, give them a break. Was the day this happened. So, but I remember all of that stuff. There was one thing I don't remember, and this was something that was told to me later, and it was my lieutenant. We were having lunch together in the hospital, in the DFAC at the hospital, and he came down. We were sitting there, and he said, "Do you remember what you kept saying over and over?" And I was like, "Oh no, I said something over and over." And I just kept saying over and over and over. He said I said it about 1,000 times. And I don't remember this. So obviously there's a span of time I don't remember. I just kept saying over and over and over, "Don't let me go into shock. Don't let me go into shock." I know very little about shock. I don't know much about it. I could remember my buddies trying to give me water and me telling them. So this is the part I do remember about that. I can't drink water. And I remember this from basic training. Like, if you're in shock, you're not supposed to drink water. And they kept trying to give me water. I'm like, "Don't give me water." So I think that was probably the same time. I just kept saying, "Don't let me go into shock." In reality, I was probably already in shock.
Sure.
That's why I kept saying it. That's why I don't remember it.
A lot there, huh?
Were you married before this?
Thank God, no.
Okay.
And I say that because in that hospital, I saw guys who were. And by the time they got out, they weren't.
Okay.
You take vows for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Man, what does worse really mean? Does it mean that you lose your leg and you lose your looks, you lose your identity, you can't do anything anymore, and now you have to be taken care of 100%? Is that for worse? Is that what people are signing up for when they get married? I don't think so. You say the words, but you don't really look into what worse can be. And I saw a lot of marriages disintegrate.
You got married after all of this.
Yes, I did. And that's the amazing thing, man. My wife, who I met
I'm just sitting here. Wow. I'm just wowed.
I met my wife through a mutual friend named Matt H.O.P.E. And, people probably are wondering why I mentioned his name, because there's really no importance to that other than the fact if you really put that together, it's Match.com. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there it is. That's right. So I always like to say it's better to have met my wife through a mutual friend than online. So, but Match.com. And I always say I dated the same way on Match that I did in high school. And that was basically, if you didn't ask me out, it wasn't happening. And that's because I am a baby. I am a baby. Like, if you say no, I'm going to be like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just was on Match, and, if people reached out to me, and a lot of times they did. But it always started with, "Thank you for your service," or something like that. These people all knew me before they would reach out to me. They heard my story or whatever on the news, saw me on the streets, whatever. So they would say, "Thank you for your service." And I don't know, that's really nice, and I do appreciate it. But, is that where I want the relationship to begin? Probably not. So my wife, Amy, had reached out to me, and, it was funny. She started talking to me, and, I'm like, she has not mentioned anything about the way I look or anything. And I'm like, does she know anything about me? And then I'm like, is she blind? Like, like if I meet her, is she gonna be? She may be blind. She may not know what I look like, but she wasn't. She wasn't blind, and but she just didn't see it the same way. She didn't care. She is extremely, extremely special.
Yeah, but tell them why that you liked her.
Oh, she was wearing a New York Giants hooded sweatshirt in one of her pictures, and I was like, done deal. Yeah, so I married her the next day. I'm kidding. It wasn't. It was a year and a half later we got married. That would have been super creepy.
This is such a wow to hear all this.
What's crazy is I've heard this thousands of times, and I'm still riveted. I just heard a few things I'd never heard before. And a couple little things he didn't mention that are just very, very important is that Montez passed away 6 days later, 7 days later.
7 days later, yep. September 7th, 2006.
Who's that?
The guy that was standing on the seat next to him.
That was the guy next to me.
Next to him.
So he made it to the hospital. I made it to as well, and actually our driver did as well. There's 3 of us in the vehicle. We all made it to the hospital in Texas. So yeah, actually, I was on my way to telling that part because it took 30 minutes for the helicopters to get there. But then we got on an airplane, and after the helicopters took us to a hospital. And that actually, I remember everything up until that hospital. They put a needle in my arm, and I don't remember anything. But they took us from the little hospital in Iraq to a hospital in Germany on an airplane. And when I was at that when I was at the hospital in Germany, they had already called my parents, and they told my parents, hey, get your passports, come to Germany. This was 2005. They didn't have passports. They hadn't really traveled to Canada once in a while, but you didn't need a passport. So they had to go get their passports. They went to Walmart really quick. They knew they'd get the pictures done really fast there. And while they were at Walmart, they got a call from the doctors. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to say, the reason that they told them to come to Germany wasn't because, like, hey, Rick's going to stay in Germany. Basically, it was like Rick's going to die in Germany.
Yeah.
Germany was not a burn center. But I was in such bad shape that they did not believe I could make the flight from Germany to San Antonio. So that's where the burn center was. And my other 2 buddies, Montez and Lowe, our driver, they were going. And they had to get them there. They couldn't wait for me to get better who knows if it was even going to happen. So they called my parents basically to say, come to Germany and say goodbye. But then when they were at Walmart getting their passport, they called back and said, you'll never believe it. And my dad always says it, and I'll never forget the line. He says the doctor told him the stars lined up right. The stars lined up right, and we got him on the plane. So, like, I can tell almost every story without choking up. The part where I talk about my parents is, like, always the hardest.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I can't imagine the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that they could have felt in that moment. Like,
of course.
I was dealing with it. I was going through it. I mean, at that point, I was probably already even in a coma.
Mm-hmm. But they had no control.
Right, none. And I think that's what so we talk about post-traumatic stress, and I think a lot of post-traumatic stress comes from that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. You can't do anything about it. You can only sit back and watch it. Mm-hmm. Like my buddies who were over there. I don't have any post-traumatic stress. And I think part of that is because, like, I had to go through it, and I either had to get better or I didn't get better. I didn't sit back and just watch it happen where everybody else had to. And I think that's a reason some people end up with post-traumatic stress, and I think that's the reason I didn't. Just I had to deal with it. I had no choice.
That is fascinating. Beyond fascinating.
And then Montez, we got to the hospital, and Montez did pass away 7 days later. So that was a tough one for me. Almost every day that I was awake, I would ask about Montez, and they wouldn't tell me because I was dealing with so much already, emotionally, physically. They want to, how am I going to handle that? Am I going to shut down? And just, like, to a point, you can keep yourself alive, but you can also die. You can die by making a choice of giving up, and I think they were scared of that. So they didn't tell me until, I don't know, it was probably 2.5, 3 months, maybe 3 months in, and they came in my room and they said, hey, Montez didn't make it. And at that point, I had figured it out in my head because they had kind of roundabout. Because I had a general come in my room one day and I said, hey, how's Montez? And he said, he's home. And I think that kind of clicked in my head a little bit, meaning that he was buried in California.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've gone out to visit his gravesite 3 times now. Yeah. in California. So
We were just out at Camp Pendleton speaking to 1,000 infantry Marines last year, and Rick drove down there. It was pretty cool.
You both of you have basically two school presentations that you give, one for the younger crowd and one for an older crowd, and they're different presentations.
we actually have three.
You have three.
Well, we have a lot of presentations, but our signature presentations are those three that get the ball rolling.
We have a K2, 3, 5, and then 6 through 12 or 7 through 12, depending.
Yeah. What's the look on the faces for the older kids when you're telling your story?
It is funny to me because I'm waiting in the wings basically. Tom's already out there. He did his intro with the fighting in the beginning, and then he says I hate fighting when he comes out. So he's got them riled up. They're excited. They're he gets them going with some of the interactive stuff that we do in the presentation. And sometimes when you get a kid up and going, it's hard to get them back down to a level.
Sure.
And I can sit in the back and I can hear some of the kids maybe being disruptive once in a while. And it's not that often, but you can hear it. And then I come out.
And they don't know he's there.
Right. They have no clue that I'm there. So I'm hiding in the back. And then all of a sudden my video plays. And they think that, they're just watching a video of this guy who was injured in Iraq. And then I come out, and I can always see it, too, because he starts introducing me before I'm all the way in the front. And he says, will you please welcome one of the H.O.P.E experts? And as soon as that happens, the kids are like, and I can see all their heads turn to see if they can find where I'm coming from. But then I go out there and I talk, and you can always hear a pin drop.
Crickets.
They are just... And it's almost weird because sometimes I'm in the back and I'm like, oh, man, who is this kid going to be? I can hear him out there right now, the disruptive one. I can't pick him out when I go out there.
They're listening.
They're listening.
They're listening.
It's beyond listening.
And what a difference. I mean, hearing is biological. Listening is so much more than that.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you say that's probably one of the biggest problems that we have in this whole world, whether you've been injured in a war or not, is that we've all lost the ability to listen.
Yeah.
And they're listening to you.
Yeah.
You've got them.
But honestly,
all of them.
That's the reason I do what I do today, because I realize that with what happened to me, with the way I look, I am going to get attention. It's going to happen no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can get attention for the right reasons or I can get attention for the wrong reasons. If people are going to listen, I better have something good to say.
Yeah.
And when I first did my first presentation ever, it was a little one in a small gym in a church in Texas. And I talked, and I don't even know what the heck I talked about. I always say I may have talked about pancakes for 15 minutes. I don't have a clue. But what I knew was they were all listening, every single one of them. And that's when I realized if I'm going to say something and people are going to listen, I better help them. And that's where I learned about hope. And that's really where it came in, because I was speaking on my own before I met Sweethearts and Heroes. But I was going out there and I was telling a story, and people were like, oh my gosh, what a story. But what were they really getting out of it?
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh my gosh, I fit into this hope piece in Sweethearts and Heroes, because I know a lot about hope and hopelessness.
Can I go a little deeper on the listening piece? Because I watch this, and I watch kids put themselves in Rick's shoes or imagine what that would be like. And we call that what? Putting yourself in someone else's shoes. What do we call that? What's that word that we use? Yeah, but what's the word that we teach every kid?
Starts with an E.
Starts with an E. Empathy.
Empathy.
Right? Putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
I've spent about a decade of my life studying and reading everything I can consume on empathy. Empathy has been cut in half in the last 30 years in our high school to college-bound students. Both affectively and cognitively, empathy has been cut in half. There's no major university that would not back that up with a tremendous amount of research. And empathy is the only reason we have a functional society in America today. Because in the world today, Because if you go deeper on empathy, what you understand is that we have learned to share resources with one another and help people that are in distress so that when we're in distress, people help us. Mm-hmm. That's how we built communities and functional societies as human beings for thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Now, that thing called empathy has been cut in half in our high school to college-bound students. Now, I don't need to give anyone a lecture, especially a Gen Xer, on the intuitiveness that if that is destroyed, what's that going to do to our society, in any society on planet Earth? Now, I'll go a little bit deeper on this listening thing, because if anyone listening wants to look this up, you just go and look up the intergroup empathy bias. Intergroup empathy bias. And there's a lot of research around this. And what we've learned is that empathy is really a 3-stage process. And and remember, all empathy is a set of neurological circuits in the brain and housed in a couple different parts of the brain. But all it is neurons that have fired together. Yeah. They wire together. And that path becomes smoother and smoother. The myelination around those axons, that action potential fires down, just gets faster and stronger the more you use that circuitry. And we call it empathetic fitness. And that's what we do. We make kids more empathetically fit. But the coolest thing is when Rick comes out and those kids, like you said, they're listening. They're putting themselves in Rick's shoes. And when you look at empathy, this intergroup empathy bias, it's a 3-stage process that everybody listening, especially if you're a Gen Xer and above, you went through this. Every single person listening. And when you look at this 3-stage process, it always starts with perspective taking. You buy a new house, right? You pull up there, there's your new neighbor. You got to get out and talk to him. And what do? You walk over to him and you're like, this is what you're thinking. Trump or Harris.
Yeah, right.
you hunting or fishing, needlepoint or crochet. Sure. You just start to take their perspective, but you do it through the ear gate. That's the way logic is typically built. Yeah. Right? And there's a whole nother topic, but we have assaulted kids' ability to logically form logic in their brain state because we're coming in through the back door of imagination with kids and we're flooding them with images. But for all of human history, thousands and thousands of years, people spoke to you largely. It went in through the ear gates. Your brain puzzled this thing together. But when you meet someone new, that's what you do. You take their perspective, but you have to do it through listening. And that process, if you like what you're hearing, you start to hang out with them. You start to spend more time with them, which takes you into the second stage of empathetic growth or the forming of an intergroup, and that's emotional sharing. And you just start to share emotions. Mm-hmm. You heard Rick and I do it. Yeah. Guys do it. They pick on each other.
Sure.
Women send funny cat videos or little kid videos, and they just share emotions with one another. Then it leads to a third stage, which is called empathetic concern, which is it's the compassion side. Mm-hmm. A guy named Daniel Batson coined this term, and it's compassion. It's the sympathetic consciousness of another's distress with the desire to alleviate it. Mm-hmm. That's the definition of compassion.
Interesting.
And here's the funny thing. You don't just meet someone outside your door that's suffering and go hug them, or because you haven't been through that 3-stage process of listening to them, sharing emotion with them. So you have no business trying to alleviate their suffering or their challenges. But your closest friends, you immediately go to helping them. And this is what we do when we go to schools, because we go into schools and teachers say, I don't know why kids aren't nice to each other anymore. They're just so mean to each other. And it's like crystal clear to us. Because when do kids, 9.5 hours is the average screen time for an American teen today outside of their schoolwork. So when you're in a 2-dimensional world for 9.5 hours a day, you're not face-to-face, embodied synchronously with other human beings, locked into their social engagement system, and most importantly, listening to them. Because you just can't go to empathetic concern and helping people. You have to go through this process neurologically of listening, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, sharing emotions with them, which leads to empathetic concern. So one of the biggest things that we do outside of this presentation stuff is this thing called circle. It's an ancient practice, and I won't dive into it now.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it back over to you. But I just wanted to, and that's what Circle's about. It's about listening to other people.
Yeah.
Because then you can move to sharing emotion, and then once they leave this space, it will give them the ability to perform that compassion on their peers when they're struggling. So very, very important what you did. But the coolest thing for me is that's the beginning.
Yeah.
When Rick comes out and you can hear a pin drop, crickets, the kids are putting themselves, it's my favorite part of what we do because I sit in the back. I got these wild kids. I did all this fun stuff. They're going berserk. And now that's like, boom.
Yeah.
And they're like listening to him, and you can feel them putting themselves in his shoes. And that's the beginning stages of empathetic growth, is listening.
Fascinating. You're talking about this circling. I mean, this is something that, like you said, has been around for thousands of years.
All of your ancestors sat in circles.
Yeah, and we really got something from it. We're all looking at each other.
Yeah.
And it's almost something that can become, for lack of a better term, addictive. We want to do it again.
Oh, we're craving it. Kids are craving it.
One
of my favorite questions
they don't want to stop it.
One of my favorite questions to ask a kid. I got it from a 9th grader years ago. It's a rocker, man. Especially if you set it up the right way. You say, where would you go if you had a time machine? It's a funny time machine because you can only use it once. I cannot count the amount of kids that say to me today, this is how I know we're going to be okay. If we let them come up with a solution. I have a ton to say about this, but this is how I know we're going to be okay. Because kids today will say, I wish I could go back before technology. I'm stressed out about it. They're figuring it out. And they crave this human connection with their peers and with the other people around them.
You and I are right about the same age. We're also right about in the same physical condition. Right, Rick?
Yeah, me and Tom are as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But if we were to go back and relive the 70s, pre-cell phone, man, it's like if Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was on TV at 8 o'clock on CBS, you either caught it or you didn't catch it.
The A-Team, Knight Rider.
Exactly.
Jeez. 30 minutes, that's all you had.
Yes, 30 minutes, but only if you did your homework first, and then you've got to practice the piano or whatever it is. But we had so much less distractions. We had less stress that way.
We're in the age of mass distraction today.
Yeah, man, and it's like I don't know. I get stuck in. Maybe I'm turning into an old man, but I get stuck in the good old days of like when we played outside. We used our imagination. We climbed trees. We rode our bicycles around. Yeah. We weren't glued to a cell phone. If we had to go for a ride in the car, we had to just sit and count blue cars.
Or fight with your sibling.
Or fight with your, you know, you had to be patient. You had to, it was a totally different world.
So and now I'll summarize it like this. You were working on real human skills.
Right.
And that's what you were doing. And you don't realize that you were doing that. You were building human skills.
Right.
Yeah.
You had to listen to others. You had to listen to yourself. That's what you had to listen to. Mm-hmm. And now it's like fast forward. And it's like when we were kids in school then, our teachers were teaching us. They weren't necessarily parenting us. Mm-hmm. Now they're doing both, and maybe even heavy on the parenting side.
Yeah, no parents at home, or
right?
Not being able to parent
right.
at home.
Now we've got all of these shootings in schools. We've got mental health issues. We've got suicide. Age 10 to 14, you said has tripled since 2007. That was unheard of when I was a kid. Unheard of. I say to you guys, and I don't mean to be negative here, but it seems to me like you guys are paddling upstream against the current in a river called Evil.
Huh.
And you guys are making, the two of you together are making progress up that river backwards. There's so many of us that are paddling like hell and we're not going anywhere, or maybe gaining an inch or two.
Yeah.
But most of us are not able to keep up with the current. You guys are really have worked over some white water here, and you've made some real progress. I mean, can you imagine if we had, I mean, you're hitting 2 million kids in however many years you said that you've been to different schools. Can you imagine if there were a few more organizations exactly like you in the world? And maybe there are, but there's not enough. But you guys are literally having an effect on the world. You're changing the world, both of you.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. You know, sometimes I lay in bed every night, 7 days a week, and think about that current, like I'm trying to swim against Niagara Falls, and
Question that current.
yeah, you know, just
Like, are you
man.
having that difference that you're capable of having, but is it real? What's it doing?
Right.
And we know it is, but
These kids in these schools, including my daughter, they didn't ask to come into this
sure.
fucked up world.
Yeah.
Do you ever look out at them and say, I can't imagine being that age with what's going on right now, politically, the whole world, with what's going on right now, with technology and everything? I can't imagine. Do you ever feel that way?
Let me make a quick comment about that, because there's oh man, when you were talking to, I have so many things to say. I mean, we do days worth of professional development with adults too, and it's not because we're smart, because we're not. We're a couple of dumb wrestlers. I could show you my report card. I'm not that smart, but
You still have your report card?
I have a couple little things. I'll have to show you.
My parents threw
sometime.
those away as soon as they got them. They were like, no proof of this.
Yeah, but it's really interesting what you're saying, because it's so easy, if you're listening, to jump on the bandwagon and say, when I was a kid, it wasn't like this.
Yeah,
But
it is easy.
It is, man. And Robert Greene, if you know who that is, he's been on Rogan a bunch of times. He's just one of the most brilliant thinkers on planet Earth. He wrote the 48 Laws of Power, the Laws of Human Nature, and he calls it generational narcissism. And he has a wonderful quote in his book, and it says something to the effect of, today's youth are rotten, godless, and lazy. They'll never be able to preserve our culture. They'll never be what youth used to be, or something like that.
Yeah.
It came off a piece of Sanskrit from 1000 BCE. Like, absolutely nothing has changed.
Yeah, right.
Every generation says the same thing.
Yeah.
But, I got in an argument this summer with a guy. He pulled out his phone, and, I'm, because of my dyslexia or my whatever that I have or had or still have, I don't even know, I always pick up on little things, like I've been watching the way you've been rocking your foot and stuff like that. You do that, and just little things. And he's looking at his phone. He's like, huh. I was like, what do you mean, huh? And he showed me this picture, and it was this, looked like it was taken in the 80s. This little kid is probably 4 or 5 with a Coors Light can.
No.
And I don't know, it's probably empty, but it says Gen X, the last great generation before the sissies were born. And he showed it to me. He goes, you work with kids. What do you think of these kids, these sissies today? And I almost took the bait, right? Like, that's an easy piece of bait, because I feel a little bit of that. Like, yeah, man, these freaking kids are soft today, man. Toughen up, man. You got bonked on the head, man. I've been dropped on my head 100 times in wrestling practice. Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
So, you want to do that. But I didn't. I've taught myself to, when I have an immediate reaction, probably Rick, because he calls me on my bull crap, and he knows when I'm
about to.
I know, like, whenever I say anything, he knows whether I'm like fabricating. But, I paused for a second. I looked at this guy, and I was like, I looked at him, I kind of pointed at him. I said, who created him? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, bro, you got to go in the bathroom, look in the mirror. I said, you created these sissies, and now you're trying to blame it on them.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. You did. I did. What gives us the right? And I'll tell you a quick little story. So
And also, this didn't happen instantly.
No.
This is a progression over hundreds and thousands of years.
But the acceleration of this in this last generation, these last two generations, in Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, we did a cyberbullying thing a couple of years ago at South Colony, big decent school in the Capital Region in New York. And, we were there to give a bullying cyber presentation. And, I looked up a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to tell these kids, but we're going to make it fun and interactive. I did this whole thing, right? Because I'm the adult. I'm supposed to deliver the lesson. We get all done, and I can close my eyes and still see this girl, 10th grader. And she comes up to me, and she goes, Mr. Murphy, she goes, you thought when we were 2 or 3 and we were playing with this phone, you thought it was cute. You even called your sister your mom, and you were like, oh, my God, you should see how good she is on this thing. She's better than I am. She's like, then we turned like 8, 9, and we became annoying.
Yeah.
And you put it in our hands, and you're like, use this. And she goes, then when we turned like 13, you tried to control us with it. Mm-hmm. And she looked me dead in the eyes, and she's like, who created this whole mess? And then she just kind of smiled at me, and I was like, we did. And then we want to turn around and call them sissies. Like, when are we going to take responsibility for this and say we created this mess?
Yeah, right.
And then we want to hammer these kids. And I say we bludgeon them with our shield, our narcissistic generational shield, and we bludgeon kids to death with it because their shield is about this big and they can't defend themselves. That's a cowardly thing to do, to hide behind your generational narcissistic shield, smash some kid to death with it. When I was a kid, I wasn't like this. I wasn't a sissy. Dude, you're a freaking coward. Why don't you put your big boy pants on and say, I'm sorry I did this to you, kid?
Yeah, but I also think like that generation that's saying that, oh my God, like we didn't live like this. Go to 2 generations before you.
Yeah.
And that person's laughing like, you sleep on a bed.
Yeah.
You have a house.
And this is fascinating to hear this. And I can't help but think of my dad would sometimes say, look, when you see something that's going on at the school, somebody's beating up somebody or somebody's yelling at somebody or someone, whatever, don't get involved. Don't make that problem your problem. Don't get tangled up in somebody else's web. What you guys are saying is it is the responsibility of all of us as a society, as a human being, to, and Rex was in here just the other day saying, so many of us just, let's call the police. Be the change. Be the good. If you're a hero, walk toward the problem and yes, get involved. Have some impact to evoke change in a positive way.
It's so easy to say it's not my problem.
I know.
But when you say that, it is your problem. That whatever's happening that you're not doing anything about is it's affecting your environment. It's affecting the people around you. It's your problem. Not directly, you're taking it indirectly, but it's your problem.
And not just at the school as a student, but also in the parking lot at Pressure.
100%. Yeah.
Or in a restaurant or
so
wherever.
It's like, what are adults teaching to kids today? It's not my problem. That's what we say, and then they walk away from it. Then we expect them to do something when they go to school. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Of course.
Our message hinges really on what Einstein said, and you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. And Einstein said, this world is a dangerous place to live, not because of evil people, but because of those who choose to do nothing about it. Powerful, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. We don't have a dangerous world because of evil. We have a dangerous world because we don't have enough people jumping into action and trying to stop those things from happening.
Right. There will always be evil.
Always be evil, man.
You're not getting rid of that part. So who's going to step up?
Yeah.
You guys are doing an outstanding job paddling against it.
Yeah.
You really are. You're both very brave.
Slow strides.
I mean, what you're taking on, what you're faced with is tremendous, and you have a huge team of people behind the scenes that are helping you boys out.
And that's why we're
Huge.
able to paddle a little harder.
Yeah,
that's why we make more headway today than we did 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Kudos to Leon, and please help me.
Yeah, we got so many
gosh.
good people. You know,
It's a big
I
team
first
now.
person I'd give a tremendous amount of credit to is Pat Fish.
Yeah.
Pat saw us basically in middle school, and I joined our team 7-8 years ago, and he wrote a great book called Boredom School. It's a poetry book, you know, about a new kid to a school. Not that one.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but Pat Fish has been a huge, he's in school almost every day. We hired a kid named Josiah McKeon, just a tremendous young man, is in schools, connecting, helping young people. We got my daughter Abigail, does all of our video stuff, and her husband Loudon, the Grangers, I got to call him now. We got a guy, Winton Buddington, who's just brought us in for 6 or 7 years, and he had a big middle school of over 350 kids per grade level, and he's been working with us now, a 14-year principal in Bay Trail Middle School. And we got another woman named Jen Gay, who's a 20-year science teacher that took a year leave of absence because this work fundamentally changed her life, and just so many other people that have just
Come on, dude.
Brian.
Come on, man.
Shoot, Brian, I'm sorry.
Brian,
Forgive me.
This doesn't happen
Without
None
Brian.
Of it. Without Brian.
Without
man.
Brian.
Now, Brian would never want to be mentioned right now.
He doesn't want to talk on the phone, doesn't
Yeah.
want to talk to anybody.
But, man,
Yeah.
Brian has taken over so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. If it wasn't for this case, 28 years old, he is like, he's a magician, man. He just, every piece of literature, everything we write, that book in your hand, Rick wrote the whole book, but Brian put the whole thing together.
Yeah, I'd say he had much more time in it than
Yeah,
I did,
yeah,
really.
yeah. So without Brian, this whole thing doesn't scale.
A bridge named Amos.
A bridge named Amos, yeah. That's for the little ones, K
All right.
through 4, K through 5.
Where do we get this?
Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, but if you're interested in a bulk order, you can reach out to us at info@sweetheartsandheroes.com, and it'll come to us, and you can get them a lot cheaper through bulk.
I watched Rick read that to kids today. Oh, man, it was like I had a lump in my throat watching these little first graders,
Yeah,
kindergartners.
I was worried when I wrote the book because it's long. It's 52 pages, and some of the pages are pretty lengthy, and I know that's not what you're supposed to do when you write a kid's book, but I couldn't shorten it.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna send it out as is. But I've read it now a bunch of times, and I read it today to some kindergartners who, were very, very lively kindergartners. We did the presentation with them today, but then I read the book to them after, and they were silent the entire 10 or 11 minutes that it took to read the book. So
What's that tell you?
that feels good.
Yeah.
That felt really good when I know, I am not an author. That's for darn sure. But I wrote a kid's book.
Williamstown School tomorrow.
Yeah.
For you guys. What time are you going to be there doing this?
8:30 a.m. is start time, and we actually have 4 presentations tomorrow. So we'll start with the youngest, I think K2, and then we'll do a 3 through 5, 3, 4, and then a 5, 6, and then a 7, 8. Yeah.
How do other schools in Vermont get you? Is there a wait list? How do they get in touch?
Yeah, the last 3 years we've been booked almost every single day of the school year.
We will fit you in somewhere.
Yeah, we'll especially if you're in Vermont. We love
Right.
Vermont. We were just at Waits River Valley, and I hate saying this because if other schools hear this, like, I want to go live at that school.
Yeah.
It was the greatest.
I'll be back on Friday.
He'll be back there Friday.
And you had my little girl up there.
Yeah, that
You
was
didn't
crazy.
even know.
Didn't even know. Okay, well, how
Luck of the draw.
serendipitous is that?
Luck of the draw.
That's something
I'm
else.
looking forward to going back. What grade is she in again?
She's in 4th.
4th grade, so I'm going to see her on Friday.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
You guys are amazing. You're doing yeoman's work, both of you. You really
Thank
are.
you.
Well, Mother Teresa said, never worry about the numbers. Just help the person next to you, and you've changed the world.
Wow.
And that's what it's about, man. It's about these 2 core axioms.
Yeah.
Sweethearts give hope, and heroes take action. And that's what the whole message has been based on, the fact that every single human being has hope inside of them that they can give to other people. And there's a few that will take action. And, and that's what we do. We teach kids how to jump into action.
Yeah.
We invented something years ago called a bully drill, much like a fire drill. And we have coined ourselves the stop, drop, and roll of bullying.
I've seen it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Bad thing about that is stop, drop, and roll doesn't work. So
And you're covered in fuel.
that's the only bad thing about that. We did not mention what HOPE stands for, and I think that's something we have to do. And but H.O.P.E stands for Hold On, Possibilities Exist, and that's for anyone out there watching and listening and struggling with something. And man, it doesn't get any worse than this. Okay, well, if it doesn't get any worse than this, and hold on because it gets better. And hold on to find out the possibilities that exist. Like, I don't get married. I don't have my girls. I'm not sitting here right now if along the way of really, really hard stuff I gave up and just said it's over for me.
I have actually heard you say somewhere online that correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm paraphrasing here, that in some ways you're almost glad that this happened to you?
So I'll tell everyone that this is the best thing that ever happened to me because of those things that have entered my life. Now, what happened to me was an awful, awful thing. I was on fire and I almost died. But if I looked at it that way the rest of my life, again, I'm not sitting here. So not only am I sitting here because I got injured, but it's because I chose to find positive things that come out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting here. I don't meet my wife. Like, she's not attracted to me. Like, look at me. I have no nose and no ears and hands that barely move. Like, you know what I mean? If I don't have a positive attitude, I'm screwed. If I don't have a sense of humor, I'm probably screwed too. But
That's amazing.
Yeah, so you gotta. So that's the way I look at it. Now, I will not say that I'm glad it happened, but it did. So it's like when a 12-year-old tells me their story, and I can't even fathom what they are dealing with because of their story and how insane it is to me. I understand hopelessness, but I don't understand their story. My story is way different than theirs. But I tell them, you know what? In this, eventually, not right now, or maybe it's right now. It's up to you. It's not up to me. You can find something good that came out of this. And I know that is extremely hard to understand, right, when you're dealing with awful stuff. But hold on long enough, and you will find out that the possibilities that exist for your future are amazing.
Wow.
I didn't want you to deal with difficult things, but you will, and you have. So now, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to let it bring you down the rest of your life, or are you going to do something with it positive?
I just want to make one last comment about, because it feels like you're about to wrap up. But, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, read it many, many times. And years ago, the first time I read it, he says meaning comes in three forms. But he ultimately says the greatest sense of meaning comes from the attitude that we take towards the unavoidable suffering that we go through. And the first time I ever heard that, you can really get into that and be like, yeah, that's where ultimate meaning comes from, the attitude that we take towards the unavoidable suffering that we go through. But for regular people like me and you, and I don't really know your story and the challenges. You were homeless, lived under a bridge for a while. That was pretty cool. But you don't really understand that, and you don't ever really want to understand that. But, when I met Rick and the first time he told me that getting blown up was the best thing that ever happened to him, I thought, nah, you got to say that. Like, you don't have any choice. But after a year or two, and one time he said to me, and I can close my eyes and see where I was standing when he said it. And he said, if I got it all back, my hands, my ears, my nose, my leg, all that stuff, he said I'd have to take back all that hope I've given to other people. And it just wouldn't be worth it. And, that's when I think back, and Viktor Frankl was a 2-time survivor of Auschwitz, the death camp in Poland. And you want to think you understand it, but you don't really understand it until you spend 200 days a year with a guy like Rick Yarosh, and you see the suffering and the challenges, and he just never has a bad attitude. And so I have trained myself because of that. I mean, I owned a restaurant in St. Albans for 12 years. And, when COVID hit us and the state of Vermont called me and they said, shut it down, I got in an argument with the lady on the phone. I said, I can't shut it down. I said, we got 70 employees here. I said, we got single moms. I said, we can't shut it down. they need to survive. And the lady's like, well, you're going to lose your license. So we had to pull the plug on the in-person dining. We never did any takeout, anything like that. I went down to the kitchen that morning, 10 o'clock, literally kicked the kitchen doors open. And everybody looked at me that was in this restaurant. And I said, we're shutting the restaurant down. And you know what I said? It's going to be the best thing that ever happened to this restaurant. And everybody was like, what? The 2 years after COVID was the best years we ever had. We consistently did about 1.7 million for 3 or 4 years. And that's not a lot of money in the restaurant business. Our last year, we didn't even make it through the full year, and we did 3.3 million. COVID was the best thing that ever happened, but it wasn't COVID. It was the attitude that we took towards the suffering that was going on with the people in our community. And all we did, I thought we were going to go out of business. And so what we did is we started giving stuff away. We had a spaghetti thing that we had a line down the street. We gave away ice cream. We gave away mac and cheese. We drove stuff to people's houses. Our team got together and they served the community. And then the community gave back to us. It gives me chills to think about it. But it was just the attitude that we took. So anybody that's listening to this, it's not about bullying. It's not about just kids. I mean, we spoke to 1,000 infantry Marines that lost 5 Marines in one battalion to suicide in a year. We're speaking to linemen in Des Moines, Iowa. You know, the general suicide rate is around 10 to 12 per 100,000. Our kids are approaching that in America today. The Marine Corps is 34.9 per 100,000. Linemen that work on high voltage power lines, 52 per 100,000. This is not an issue that is just for young people. This is a crisis of meaning we have in America today and the struggle we're all having. And there's only one way to fix it, and that's to get back to community and to commune with other people the way we were intended to, the way that we have been for thousands of years, taking care of each other. That's it. And it's about sweethearts and heroes. It's about the hope that you carry when you walk out that door, and the next person that you see needs that hope because they're blown up. Maybe they, had a parent just die. Maybe they had some awful traumatic thing happen to them. But you carry that hope. But it's a choice you have to make to give that to them. And that's what I've learned from Rick Yarosh, is this notion of hope is a choice that you have to make to give to other people. And that's what changes the world. That's it.
Damn. What an honor it is to have both of you guys in the Aired Out studio. I mean, I'm just, this is some real profound takeaways today. This is one that I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to, I think. Remarkable. I only hope that I can have both of you back in here someday.
Absolutely. Bring your daughter.
I would.
We'll see what her perspective is on what she saw.
I would love that.
But this was fun. I appreciate you so much, JD.
Appreciate you too, and God bless you both.
Every day.
Tom, let's see the bicep on the way out here.
Oh no!
No, that's embarrassing. Come on, dude.
That is not embarrassing.
You know what?
Love it,
dude.
You got painted fingernails.
I
Here.
know,
Can
right?
You show the nails.
Right, you got vulnerability here.
You're like a 15-year-old young woman.
Come
now.
on.
You know that?
Show them.
I'm a lot smaller than you.